Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that I think everyone listening has felt in their bones, even if you haven't quite found the words for it.
Mhm.
It's that subtle, nagging feeling that the world is suddenly moving forward at, I don't know, 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And the system's meant to keep us safe. Our laws, our regulations, our safety nets, they're moving at, let's just call it a leisurely stroll.
A leisurely scroll might be generous. It's really the defining tension of our time. We call it the cognitive age, which is this period where intelligence, whether it's artificial, networked, biological, and technology, are just evolving so much faster than our institutions can physically respond.
It feels a bit like we're trying to catch a bullet train while riding a unicycle. And that brings us to the core dilemma we're exploring today. When things move this fast, governance, the people making the rules, they face a fundamental, almost binary choice.
Right, and the source material we're digging into today, it's an essay called Governing Acceleration, the Architecture of Anticipatory Resilience.
Yeah.
It frames this choice very, very starkly.
And the choices.
The choice is, do you try to freeze the system to make it safe, or do you learn to move with it?
And I'll be honest with you, and I think I'm probably speaking for a lot of listeners here, my gut instinct is to say, freeze it, stops the train.
Of course.
Let's just figuring what is going on before we go any further. It feels like the responsible thing to do.
It feels like it, but that's the central paradox.
Yeah.
As we're going to see, that instinct might actually be the most dangerous move we can make.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. Let's unpack this idea of anticipatory governance.
Now, I know. That sounds like such a dry, bureaucratic policy term.
It really does.
It sounds like a seminar you'd fall asleep in.
But it's not.
It's not at all. It's actually a look at the missing architecture we need to survive in a world of accelerating change. It's about how we keep the wheels from falling off society.
So we're going to focus on why the old ways of making rules are failing and, more importantly, the toolkit for how we can fix them. So let's start with that first option, the one I like so much. Freezing the system. Why is that the default?
Well, to understand that, you have to look at what the source calls the quiet premise of modern governance.
Mm-hmm.
For, the last century or so, the way we make rules has been built on this single hidden assumption.
Which is?
That change happens slowly enough for us to measure it.
Right. The look before you leap philosophy. You don't jump until you know exactly how deep the water is.
Precisely. The traditional cycle for lawmaking goes something like this. First, you define the harm. You point at something and say, that right there, that's bad.
Okay.
Then you quantify the risk, you put a number on it, you get all the data, and then finally, once you have all the facts, you write the rule.
Which makes perfect sense. If you're regulating, say, the construction of a suspension bridge, the laws of physics aren't going to change while the city council is debating the safety codes.
Exactly. Concrete is concrete. That logic works beautifully when technologies evolve over decades. But here's the problem. That logic completely breaks down when systems undergo a meaningful transformation every 6 months.
Okay, let's unpack this pace mismatch, because the source points out that by the time a regulation is debated, drafted, argued over, and finally enacted, which can take years.
Right, years.
The reality on the ground has completely shifted. It's not just that the tech is faster, it's that the entire context has evaporated.
It has. The source identifies 3 specific things that shift while policymakers are arguing in that room. First, the models themselves change. The specific piece of tech you were worried about is now like 3 generations old. It's obsolete.
It's like trying to regulate cassette tapes when everyone has already moved to streaming.
Exactly. Second, the use cases have shifted. People are using the tech for things you never could have imagined when you started writing the law. And third, the incentives have adapted. The market has just moved on.
So you spend 3 years writing a perfect, airtight law for a world that literally no longer exists.
That's the poignant takeaway here. The law becomes, and this is a quote from the author, precise and irrelevant.
Wow.
You could be perfectly accurate about a situation that has just vanished. And it's important to say, this isn't because policymakers are lazy or stupid or careless.
No, of course not.
It's a structural mismatch. The machine is just running faster than the manual can be written.
And I imagine that when policymakers realize this, when they see their rules aren't working and the tech is slipping through their fingers, the reaction isn't usually to say, maybe we need a new system. It's to double down, right?
That is what the source calls the control trap. When faced with these accelerating systems, institutions almost always respond by tightening control. They panic.
They write more rules.
More detailed rules, narrower definitions, and they demand heavier and heavier compliance.
It's like squeezing a handful of dry sand. The harder you squeeze, the faster it just slips out between your fingers.
That is a fantastic image for it, because control assumes predictability. But in a dynamic environment, rigid rules don't ensure safety. They actually create blind spots. If you make a rule that is incredibly specific, saying, you cannot do X with this specific algorithm, innovation will just route around it. They'll do Y with a different algorithm.
Right. So the risk doesn't disappear. It just migrates to a place where you're not looking.
Yes.
You haven't solved the problem. You've just hidden it from yourself.
Exactly. And the source uses this brilliant analogy that really stuck with me. It says that trying to govern AI or these fast-moving technologies by freezing them in time is like regulating the weather by defining acceptable cloud formations.
I love that. Excuse me, sir. That cloud is too puffy. It's illegal.
Right.
Meanwhile, the storm is coming, regardless of what your law says.
Precisely. You can pass a law against a cumulonimbus cloud, but the rain is still going to fall. The problem isn't enforcement. The problem is the assumption of stability. You cannot govern what moves by pretending it's standing still.
So, if the freezing the system approach is a dead end, if it's just yelling at the clouds, what's the alternative? The source talks about anticipatory governance. How is that different from just regular governance with a cooler name?
So anticipatory governance, it starts with a fundamentally different premise. It kind of admits defeat on prediction.
Okay.
It says, we cannot predict the future of AI. We cannot know exactly what will happen in 5 years, but we can prepare for multiple futures.
Okay, so it's a shift in the questions we're asking. We stop asking for a crystal ball.
Yes. The old way asks, what exactly will go wrong? It demands certainty.
Right.
The new way asks, if something goes wrong, how does the system absorb it shock? And maybe more importantly, who has the authority to intervene?
That feels like a huge mental shift. We're moving from trying to prevent every single specific bad thing, which is impossible, to just making sure the system can handle it when bad things inevitably happen.
Correct. It shifts the goal from control to resilience. And it shifts the activity from rule writing to capacity building. You're building the capacity to handle the unknown.
This reminds me of that metric the source mentioned, the one it called the most important metric no one tracks.
Ah, yes. Adaptation velocity.
I found this absolutely fascinating. We're always obsessed with how fast the tech is moving, processing speed, parameters, adoption rates. We track that stuff relentlessly. But we rarely measure how fast we are moving in response.
And that's the critical variable. The source breaks it down into this risk equation that I think every leader, whether you're in government or business, should have on their wall.
Okay, what is it?
It's simple. Risk equals threat velocity minus governance velocity.
Let's break that down for the listener, because the math there implies something pretty scary.
Sure. Threat velocity is just how fast the problem is evolving. Is the virus mutating daily? Is the AI doubling in power every month? Governance velocity is how long it takes an institution to do 3 things: notice a meaningful shift, understand its implications, and then respond with authority.
So if the technology, the threat evolves every 6 months, but your governance cycle takes 5 years.
Then you have a massive negative number. That creates a deficit. Risk is just inevitable. It doesn't matter how good your intentions are. It doesn't matter how ethical your committee is. Risk emerges in that gap.
And closing that gap is the real job.
Closing that gap, increasing our adaptation velocity is the real mandate of modern governance.
It's terrifying when you put it that way, because that gap feels huge right now. It feels like we're standing on one side of a canyon and the tech is on the other side, just running away from us.
It is.
But let's talk about how we actually close it. We mentioned moving from prediction to preparation. That sounds nice, but what does it look like in practice? I don't want this to just be abstract philosophy.
No, it's definitely not just philosophy. The source outlines specific tools. One of them is horizon scanning.
Which sounds like something from a sci-fi movie. Engage horizon scanning.
It does, doesn't it?
Right.
But it's very practical. It's about detecting weak signals early. In traditional governance, we wait for the disaster to hit the front page of the New York Times. We wait for the boom.
Yeah.
Horizon scanning is looking for the tremors at the edge of the network before the earthquake hits.
Okay, so you're detecting the smoke before the fire. You're looking at, what, developer forums, academic papers, weird outliers.
Exactly. You're looking for where the system is straining before it breaks. Another tool is scenario stress testing.
Okay.
In traditional governance, we usually bet on one future, We say this is what will happen, and we build our policy for that one specific outcome.
Right, which is brittle. If you bet on red and black comes up, you lose everything.
Yeah. Exactly. Scenario stress testing means exploring multiple plausible futures. So you test your policy against a world where AI solves cancer. You also test it against a world where it creates a bioweapon. And you test it against a world where it just hallucinates endlessly and floods the internet with spam.
So you want a governance structure that can survive in all of them.
Yes. The goal isn't to be right about the future.
The goal is to avoid being wrong.
To avoid being wrong across all futures.
That's a really helpful distinction. It feels much more robust.
It's actually how we approach safety in other high-stakes fields. Think about aviation or medicine. When we design a plane, we don't try to predict exactly where the turbulence will be on a flight from London to Tokyo.
No, that would be impossible.
Right. Instead, we design a frame that can handle turbulence wherever it happens. We build shock absorbers. The Force argues that AI governance is simply late to this lesson. We've been trying to predict the weather, the specific movements of the tech, instead of building a better plane that can fly through anything.
There's another tool you mentioned, adaptive thresholds. This one seemed really practical to me because it solves that precise and irrelevant problem we talked about earlier.
It does. Instead of writing a law with a fixed number like systems over X computing power are regulated, you create metrics that can actually change as the system itself evolves.
Because today's supercomputer is tomorrow's smartphone.
Precisely. I remember when a gigabyte of storage was the size of a refrigerator. If you wrote a law regulating 1 gigabyte drives back then, you'd be regulating nothing today.
Absolutely nothing.
Exactly. If your threshold is fixed in stone, it becomes obsolete almost instantly. Adaptive thresholds allow the regulation to slide and scale as the baseline of the technology moves up. It keeps the rule relevant without you having to rewrite the law every 6 months.
So we have the tools. Horizon scanning, stress testing, adaptive thresholds. It sounds like a solid engineering problem.
It does.
But here is where the source gets really, really interesting to me. I came into this thinking we were talking about a technical problem, better data, faster computers for the regulators, maybe more AI to watch the AI. But the source takes a hard pivot here.
It does. And this is probably the most crucial part of this whole deep dive. The source emphasizes that anticipatory governance is often misunderstood as a technical framework.
Yeah.
But it's fundamentally a human one.
The hardest part of governing acceleration is not the data.
No, it's attention.
Yeah.
It's judgment. And it is emotional regulation under pressure.
That last one, emotional regulation, that really stood out to me. We don't usually talk about empathy or calm as policy tools.
We don't.
We talk about budgets and enforcement. Why is emotion so critical here?
Because governance fails when people feel forced to decide faster than they can think. Think about it. When that risk equation goes negative, when the threat is moving faster than you are, you feel panic. And when systems move faster than empathy can intervene, we get bad outcomes. If you are panic regulating, you are going to make mistakes. You fall right back into that control trap.
So the human in the loop isn't there to just stamp the papers or, slow things down for the sake of it?
No. And this is a beautiful metaphor from the text. Human judgment is not a bottleneck to be eliminated.
Which you hear all the time from the tech side.
All the time. Humans too slow, get them out of the way. But the source argues that human judgment is the circuit breaker that keeps our systems humane.
A circuit breaker, I like that. It's the thing that trips and stops the flow when the surge gets too dangerous. It saves the house from burning down.
Exactly. We often optimize for speed, but in governance, that slowness, that ability to pause, to consider context, to apply ethics, to look at the human cost, that is the safety feature. You don't want a circuit breaker that never trips.
So successful governance in this future isn't about who writes the longest rule book. It's about who can stay calm in the cockpit.
It is. The future of governance belongs to those who can govern through motion.
Governing through motion. What does that profile look like? Who is this ideal leader?
It belongs to those who can sense change early. That's the horizon scanning. Who can pause when needed. That's tripping the circuit breaker. Who can adapt without panic. And, this is vital, who can preserve legitimacy under uncertainty.
That idea of preserving legitimacy is huge, because if the public sees the government flailing or panicking, trust just erodes instantly.
And we've seen that happen.
Oh, yeah.
And once that trust is gone, you can't govern at all. You just have chaos. So this requires a shift from rigidity to adaptability, from seeking certainty to embracing scenario thinking.
And from prediction to preparedness.
Exactly. The leader has to be able to stand up and say, I don't know exactly what will happen, but we have a system that can handle it.
It's not about less governance.
No, not at all. It's about better governance, more
Okay.
agile governance.
As we wrap this up, I want to circle back to the listener. We've talked about institutions and policymakers and global frameworks, but this really applies to everyone, doesn't it? I mean, we all live in this acceleration.
We do. We're all trying to navigate this speed in our careers, in our families, our investments. And the synthesis of all this is that we have to stop trying to force the world to stop moving. You cannot freeze the system.
You can't outlaw the cloud.
You can't. We have to build the personal and institutional muscles to move with it, to be the pilot who trusts the frame of the plane.
And this source reminds us of where this regulation actually happens. We aren't just regulating machines in a vacuum. We aren't just talking about code.
No, we're regulating the space where machines and society meet. And that space is human. That space is messy. If we only focus on the code and we ignore the human impact, we fail.
It's a powerful reminder. We can have the smartest AI in the universe. We can have the fastest processors. But if our institutions are dumb or if our leaders are panicked, we're in trouble.
And that leads to the final argument of the source, which I found quite profound. It says the real fragility of the cognitive age is not in the code. It's not in the algorithms. It's not in the silicon.
Where is it?
It lies in our institutions, our attention, and our collective capacity to remain wise under acceleration. That is the weak point.
Our capacity to remain wise under acceleration. That is definitely something I think we can all chew on. It's not just about the tech, it's about us.
It always is.
Well, that is a lot to think about. We hope this deep dive gave you a new framework for looking at the chaos of the news cycle. It's not just noise, it's a signal that we need a new architecture. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
Take care.